Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks for joining me for another episode. I am Josh with Impact, and I am your host. I'm super excited to bring you this episode, What It Takes to Become a Top 1% Investor, where I interview one of my mentors, Mike Hambright, who is the founder of Flip Nerd and also of the Investor Fuel Mastermind. Mike also has a podcast. He also runs Investor Machine. So he's well versed in talking with real estate investors, and he knows the habits and best practices of all of the best investors, as well as the habits and practices of some of the worst investors. So in this episode, we go over some of the things, some of the small steps that you can take, some of the habits that you can pick up to position yourself to become a top 1% investor, which is something that I aspire to be. So after this episode, let me know what your favorite gold nuggets are, what your favorite lessons are that you're going to implement into your own business. And as always, reach out because I love hearing from you guys and hearing what you'd like to see on the show next. Talk to you soon. Have a great one. Boom. Thank you so much for being here at the Lead Gen Underground. Mike, thank you so much for being here today, sir. We do appreciate your time. For those who don't know you, and I don't know how they couldn't, but can you just give a short intro about who you are, what you do?
Yeah, that used to be easier. I used to just say I'm a real estate investor, but now it's a little more complicated. So I am a real estate investor. I've been an investor for a little over 12 years now. I flipped hundreds of houses. I started doing multifamily deals now over the past couple of years. When I say multifamily, like 100-door plus type deals. And but early on, I kind of learned that I really love coaching. I really love teaching people and showing people what I've learned. And honestly, it makes me stronger because then they're like, well, why didn't you do this? I'm like, yeah, why didn't I do that? It just forces you to kind of like think about what you do, right, and how you do it. So I've always been kind of a connector and a joiner. And so I started off in coaching for a long time. And been coaching for a long time. Actually, I don't coach new investors anymore at this point, effective just in the past couple months, actually. I had a hard time letting that one go because it's been a part of me for a long time. But I primarily work with, outside of my own investments and other things, primarily work with experienced investors now through the Investor Fuel. Got a whole, like a couple of you guys on here that I see have a whole wardrobe of Investor Fuel shirts, but Investor Fuel is our mastermind where we have a little over 100 members from across the country that are active real estate investors of varying levels, but all kind of committed for the most part full-time to this, if not people that are doing 10, 20 deals up to people that are doing hundreds of deals a year. And also run an agency, kind of an agency model where we generate leads for experienced investors called the Investor Machine. And a few other things too, but that's in a nutshell, those are the big things.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk to you. Obviously, you've been a huge influence in my life through Fuel and just like in the past year, but I would absolutely describe you as a connector. You know so many different people and you're always willing. You're like, hey, you should know this person. Let's set up a conversation. But, I think you have such a unique perspective talking with people from Fuel, but then also coaching. So you kind of take the gamut from beginner investors up to expert level.
Yeah,
that's a good place to jump in. You started coaching, and I've been taking some polls in the group to find out where everyone self-identifies in their stage. And yesterday I did one about people's lead gen, and the biggest answer I got was people said that they were intermediate investors running 1 to 2 outbound marketing channels, right? Not 3, 4, 5, but like 1 to 2, and that's where they identified. What would you say is the biggest difference for that person to get over that hump and take it to the next level?
In terms of the number of channels that they're like focused on?
No, just anything to become an expert, an expert real estate investor, to become a top 1% investor. What do you think one of the biggest things?
I think so. If you talk about lead gen, from that perspective, hang on.
Drink your beer.
Yeah, I got a brewski going here. In terms of, let's just kind of break it down to like lead generation and other activities in your business. What does your team look like? Things like that. Not necessarily what does your team look like, but are you committed to having a team? Are you just doing everything yourself, right? So from a lead gen perspective, I definitely think, and one thing that I'll kind of point out here is, it took me a while to learn this because when I started coaching, I was a pretty high volume guy for a while. And I started by teaching everybody to like be like me. Like, here's what I do, and you should do that too. And it took me a little while to realize, and I don't know exactly why, that it's like, hey, not everybody wants to be me. I mean, there are obviously times where I don't even know if I want to be me, right? So, and so it kind of realized like, oh, well, because what happened is I met somebody that was doing pretty well. They were on the East Coast, and they made about 40 grand a deal was kind of their net. And they're like, you know what? I do a deal a month. I really don't have a lot of expenses. I work like a couple hours a day, and I make like $500,000 a year. And I was like, well, that's not bad. It's like, so it kind of this realization of like, hey, everybody has different goals. And when I say these things, like I'll say that not everybody wants to be a high volume player, right? I think that's a big differentiator. And it's like, hey, as long as you know what you want to do, like, don't try to compare yourself to everybody. Like, be inspired by that, but don't feel bad if like, well, I can't compete with that person, But I think, for sure, to take your business to the next level, you need to probably focus on more than one or two lead generation channels, because they change, right? They just, sometimes something's working, sometimes it's not. We saw that during all the not like the COVID stuff is over, but when it all kind of kicked off, there were some things that just didn't work as well anymore, and some things that started to work better. Sometimes things that were old they become new again, right? And they were things like cold calling, like that's been around for decades, but real estate investors didn't really use it until the past couple of years. And so, but from a lead gen perspective, I'd say the biggest thing is not so much the number of channels, it's how willing are you to commit to that investment. Okay. Cause there's no guarantee that you're going to get a return on it, but anybody that's been investing for any length of time kind of knows that that's a trade-off you have to make. I have to be willing to invest in lead generation to grow my business, and not to take anything away from people that are driving for dollars or doing things like that. I mean, a lot of bandit signs, things like that are just, they're just not scalable ultimately, right? And so if you have to do that to get started, so be it. I'm not here to judge you on that, but just know that paid advertising ultimately is where it's at, because you can scale that, you can grow that beyond your just your own capacity. So those are the big things I'd say, is willing to invest in it. And then I think the other thing is willing to test things and try them, instead of just like, well, I don't even know if that'll work. It's like, nobody knows if any of this shit's going to work, but try it. Like, figure out a way to test that and see if it works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, to piggyback on that, to really test and measure, what do you have to do? You have to track your KPIs, right? And so I find a lot of newer guys have no idea about their KPIs, and you just have to start by measuring a few.
Yep.
Really good points there. I talked with someone who's in fuel. I won't mention names, but talked to him yesterday. He was doing like 3,000% better than he was 3 months ago. And I said, dude, what was the big difference? And he said, I talked to so-and-so, and he told me just send 500 texts a day and commit to it, and it would pay off. And I did it. And I was like, dude, I told you to do that with cold calling. I told you to make at least 20 connects a day. But anyway, that consistency definitely pays off there.
For sure.
Right now, talk to me a little bit about some other ways, like for someone to become a top 1% investor, right? I just pulled some stats, and there's 7 million people in the country that consider themselves to be real estate investors. And there's around 21 million people that own real estate investments. So all in all, 28 million people are in our mix, right? If 7 million are investors, we got something like 70,000 to become a top 1%. All in all, it ain't that hard. That's a lot of people, a lot of different markets. Talk to me a little bit about some ways that, rather than just testing one channel and seeing if it works, how can someone ascend and scale that a little bit quicker? Say they're a really go-getter, they're hungry. I know a lot of people in this group are. How do they get up and go quicker than just by themselves?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things are just who you surround yourself with, right? At the end of the day, I think when you get around circles like we're in, not to overly promote our mastermind investor fuel, but when you get around other people, just the proximity of hearing what they're doing, or you said you had phone calls with somebody. I mean, it's not natural unfortunately, it's not natural for just two random real estate investors to just talk and share ideas. Like, usually it comes through being a part of a group like ours. You have some commitment to that group and some loyalty. And really, it's a commitment and loyalty to helping other people, and you kind of share your ideas and tactics and what's working and what's not working and things like that, right? So I think commitment to invest in yourself, whether it could be as simple as books or going to different seminars or different educational things. I mean, I've spent like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just on education, for sure. And I'm quick to pull the trigger on stuff that I think will help me, because I'm like, time is money to me. So if I can learn how to do something in like a month versus like 2 years of trial and error, like, it's just a cost benefit analysis, right? Like, hey, I'll pay for that knowledge, right? So the more you can get around people that you can learn from and that inspire you too. I found that, like if you really wanted to get good at golf, you should probably join a country club, because you're going to be around people. It's going to hold you accountable on some level because of the cost probably to like use it. Right. And there's golf pros there. So the next thing you know, you're talking to people that like, hey, can you check out my swing and tell me what I'm doing wrong here? And so it's just kind of immersing yourself in that business, which for us is real estate. So I think that's a big way, because, it forces you to think differently. Like we all think we know things, and, you've got a great Facebook group. I've got a bunch of groups, and there's a bunch of groups out there, but the truth is the free groups ultimately have some limitations too, because everybody is viewed as having an equal opinion or a say in the matter. And, you don't even know who you're taking advice from half the time.
So much.
And so I got a email today from a guy that I haven't talked to or heard from in years. And he was representing himself as kind of being a guru teaching stuff. And I know for a fact the guy's only done like 10 deals. And I haven't heard from him in years. And all of a sudden now he's sending messages about learning how to invest in multifamily. I'm like, is this guy even doing that? But he represents himself as an authority. And there's a lot of that out there. And so you just have to be careful, like, who you follow, who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of my biggest inspirations for starting this group, something that was completely vertical, not just another wholesaling group or multifamily group, but something vertical where you could take tactical things away. A lot of that for me getting out and getting started was like, who the hell should I listen to? Right. And I heard your podcast and like 3 or 4 others. And then I just kind of like zoomed in a little bit and then found that tribe around.
Yep.
And so, one of the big goals for me in the group is to introduce some of the members of my tribe to everyone else, because I think they're worthy of that attention and even the money when it comes to it, honestly. So it's one of the big things that propelled me forward. I feel like you had said before that a lot of the marketing channels go up and down. And that is one of my biggest takeaways from the past year. Like, just because cold calling or texting has worked this quarter doesn't mean it's going to be that going forward. Talk to me a little bit about how you view that, how you see that, some of the changes that you've seen in the past year, and then like what you think coming up in terms of those outbound marketing channels.
Yeah, I think, I think one thing that we forget sometimes is that different people communicate or like to be communicated to in different ways, right? And so there's no one thing that works for everybody. Like some people love getting text messages. Some people hate it. Like some people view it as offensive. Like, how'd you get this number? Like, go away. Even if they need your service, And so cold calling, like the problem with cold calling is there's so many apps and ways for people to just like send you right to voicemail or skip your call these days, like just to help us with privacy, right? But some people, love to talk, some don't. Some like getting mail, some don't. And so I think that's the big thing, is people communicate differently. And I think also that people communicate differently based on time of year. It's kind of a weird thing, but like, think of this. If you're running TV ads, which not a lot of people do because it's expensive, but TV or radio or things like, it's very competitive during election cycles, during the holidays. Like there's a lot of things, there's just a lot of noise there that you can't get your message through. For a long time, we were sending, this is like many years back, not as an agency, but for my own mail, I was sending my mail to hit on Wednesdays. And then somebody told me, and I was like, I've been doing this I spent like $1 million of my own money on advertising at that point. And somebody's like, isn't that the day that all the junk mail hits too? And I was like, you're right. Like all these flyers, like all these, like just crap, And I'm like, oh my God, my goal is to try to hit the same day when all the crap is there. Like, why am I doing that? So you just have to think about what else is in their mailbox at that time? What else is going on in the world at that time? So, and I think around the holidays, it's noisy, right? So how can you break through that clutter? People are like, in the holidays, people are getting lots of cards and holiday cards and stuff like that. So, a couple people that I know, like they go out of their way to try to make their direct mail look like it's a greeting card during the holidays, because they're like, everybody's opening those, right?
Right.
And so It doesn't look like, the typical like junk mail in a business letter. I make it look like an invitation or a greeting card so that it gets opened. And so, it's just trying to figure out how to break through during different times.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said you used to send your mail on Wednesdays. How do you guys do it now?
We try to hit on Tuesdays.
Always hit on Tuesdays.
So we drop on, we can't, as much as we can control the mail, we drop stuff on Fridays, and the goal is that it's going to hit on Tuesday. So if it's a day early, it's not a big deal. I don't like mail hitting on Saturdays or even on a Friday. So if it's a day early or a day late, that's why we shoot for Tuesday. It's like, If it's a day early and it's Monday, that's going to be Saturday. That's not good. And if it's Wednesday, not a big deal. But we really like to hit mailboxes on Tuesdays or Wednesdays.
Okay, got it. And then for your own mail or even agency, are you staggering it like week after week after week, or monthly? Or
Yeah, we placed our orders, and we usually do 4 drops. So everything we place is just automated. I mean, that's one of the challenges that we have as investors, is like the time to manage all this, right? So the more you can do stuff in a batch method and have it dribble out is a good thing. And from a small investor standpoint, you don't want all your mail to hit one week, and then the rest of the week you can't even handle all the calls, and then the other week's like, well, I don't even know what to do. So you want to try to even out the operations of your business as much as possible.
absolutely. For you guys as an agency, Jason was on here, and Jason was talking pretty extensively about what you guys do, and it was fire, honestly. He's so smart and so great at that. What else are you guys doing around the mail piece? Are you cold calling or anything, or texting like around the time when they should be getting that mail piece?
So we changed our model. Like early on, we were doing cold calling and texting for people, and that just wasn't scalable. It was a lot of work, and there was a lot of potential issues there that didn't made it a challenge for us. So now we'll skip trace people, so we can basically tell them, we can skip trace the exact same list we're mailing and provide that to you at the same time. So we enable that, but we don't do it as a service.
Okay.
But yeah, I do think that that's important. I mean, if you talk to Jason, my partner, that we're very data driven. And so when we find leads, like we all wish there was this list of, show me the list of people that want to sell for cash at a deep discount next week. It's like that list doesn't exist, right? So how do we estimate that list? Like, how do we find those people? And we just do that through data. So we try to find like who has a bunch of distress points, who has indicators or flags that are saying like, hey, something's not right here, and bubble those up to the top. So equity is important, and age might be important. The older I get, the more I realize like, hey, age isn't that important. Like, we call like I'm by the way, I turned 46 here in a couple of days. So I'm like, Nick will say this like, hey, the 60 is like the new 40, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't think, I think we have an aging population. I think just because somebody's over 65 doesn't mean they're desperate to sell, right? Now, if they're 105, like the clock's ticking, right? But probably. So, but you have to use more factors than just age and equity. It's like, okay, are they behind on taxes? Like they recently had a divorce. There's about 40 different data points that we go after. So there's a lot of information. But I think it's important to advertise in a way. So we know, you've done a lot of things. We know people that have tried texting, which you've crushed it there, but there are some people that are like, it just doesn't work for me. Like as an investor, that might not be your style. Like you might not be comfortable with that style, and that's okay. So you have to find something that hopefully is effective in generating leads, but you're also comfortable doing it.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. For someone like me, maybe out on the East Coast here, in Baltimore, I guess it's a major market. What would you, and someone's just beginning, what would you tell them just marketing channel to start out with? Just say they got $2,000 a month to spend on marketing. What would you say for lists and like method? If they're just starting out and they want to become consistent, getting 1-2 deals a month, what would you tell them to start with?
Yeah, it always comes down to like, what's your budget, right? So if you wanted to get, the truth is I think if you have a limited budget, which a lot of new real estate investors do, that's one of the things that's made texting so appealing, or even cold calling, right? Is the data is ultimately relatively cheap. And so, focused on those things. I will tell you, if you're strapped for time, and you do have a little money budget wise, like direct mail is probably the easiest thing to do because you can push a button and get it out there and leads will come to you. But that is definitely a more expensive venture. But the truth is most high volume real estate investors probably rely the most on direct mail than anything else because it's the easiest thing to scale.
Absolutely. I learned that when I came to Fuel. For a long time, I'd just been grinding with a lot of cold calls, a lot of texts and stuff like that. And then come to find out everyone is mailing it and they're not running like hamsters faster and faster on the wheel because it is scalable. It's nice that way.
One thing to consider with texting, and because a lot of us as real estate investors, we we're just cheap. We try to do everything cheap. Like, what's the cheapest way I can do it? And we devalue our time, right? So one thing that gets missed with texting and cold calling a lot of times is that people aren't putting a dollar figure on the opportunity cost of the labor, which a lot of times is you as a real estate investor. If you're small and you're like, well, what's the value of my time worth, right? And again, if you're a smaller real estate investor and you're getting started, do what you got to do to get started. Like, you got to get out of the gate. But when it comes time to scale your business, you're like, your goal was never to, I want to start this and I want to work 80 hours a week, like whatever it takes, like I'm there. Like, nobody wants that. But if that's what it takes to get started, nobody's judging you. Right. But that was never anybody's goal. Was like, man, as Gary Vee says, I'm going to work my face off forever. Like, nobody wants that. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. If someone is trying to go from, just let's just say they get to that level of doing 2, maybe 3 deals a month, and then they want to scale, right? So they get to maybe 8, 9, 10 deals a month. What do you think they should do team-wise, like hires?
Yeah.
And then how should their marketing shift as well?
Yeah. Yeah. And they go hand in hand, right? So one thing that so you have to, this is what I say, if you're doing 2, even up to 3 deals a month, you could probably do everything yourself. If let's say this, if you're resourceful and you're good at acquisitions. If you're not good at acquisitions, you're never even going to get 2 or 3 deals a month, right? But I think if you're good at acquisitions, you're comfortable talking to people, comfortable on the phone, you can hustle your way to 2 or 3 deals a month, and you'll be pretty busy. Now, it's very different if you're wholesaling versus if you're rehabbing them all and you're managing all that too. Like, that's a whole nother issue, right? But yeah, I think of the business as like a stair step. You can get to 2 or 3 deals a month on your own with your own hustle ultimately. Or if you have, sometimes we have a spouse involved or a family member that's helping or whatever. And then once you get to that first like 2 to 3 deals like pretty consistently, then you can layer, if you haven't already, layer in an admin and then layer in an acquisitions person. And if that acquisitions person is good, then you can start to step back. You'll probably be just as busy, but at that point you're working more on systems and processes and putting things in place that will allow you to scale. So, then you get up to, I think one thing to consider is a lot of times people say, well, I'm going to hire an acquisitions person. They're usually variable compensation. And you're like, well, if they don't buy anything, I don't have to pay them. And you kind of have that mentality. And it's like, yeah, but if you're not paying them, they're not going to stick around. So you got to find a way to say, like, look, if I'm doing, let's just say you're doing 2 deals a month and you figure out like, hey, if I make 20 grand a deal and I pay them 15%, so that's three grand per deal, right? If you're doing 1 deal a month, are you going to find a dedicated, committed salesperson that if all goes well, will make $36,000 a year? Like, no, you're not going to find that person, right? So sometimes as investors, we're thinking of our side. Well, yeah, I'll pay 15% if they do a deal. And if they don't, so be it. But we don't create an opportunity that allows them to thrive. And if you don't do that, then you're going to constantly be, and keep in mind as real estate investors, if you have one acquisitions person, it's like, our buddy John Martinez says, if you have one acquisitions manager, you have none. And what he means by that is if they leave, you're back in that role like immediately, right? And so how do you make yourself bulletproof? It's like, well, how fast can you get up to 2 acquisitions people? Because if one of them leaves, the other one is probably happy to have the opportunity to make some more money, even if they have to work super hard for a couple of weeks until you plug somebody else back in, right? So I think the goal is always, and we're doing this in some of our other businesses too, we're like, how do we set this up? And these are just lessons learned over the years. Like, how do I set this up to where I can step out? Like, the business can run without me. I'm not a bottleneck anywhere. And that is the goal to get to, right? And so if you had a stair-step approach, it's, I'm kind of reiterating myself now, rambling. 2 or 3 deals, bring on an acquisitions person and maybe an admin. You get up to 5 or 6 deals, maybe two acquisitions people, which is good for you. It provides an insurance policy, and maybe 2 admins, or add in a VA that can help with some administrative stuff or something like that.
Absolutely. That's really good. For someone else, it's kind of where I am. We're at the point of getting, 6, 8, 9 deals a month.
That's great.
Something like that. And right now, I'm running around like crazy. My phone's buzzing like crazy. I can't get to everything, and I know I'm missing some things. So use me as a case study. Right now, I just brought on a lead manager in-house who will train to be inside sales, and I have another acquisition guy. And then we have a cold caller, VA, and Ashley. Who's my next hire? What should I hire for?
So you have a lead manager, and for you, a lead manager is taking inbound calls, or what is people call lead manager and they mean different things. What is?
Sure.
Clarify
So
that.
mainly we're doing cold calling right now, a little bit of texting, and then some mail and PPC. Everything flows back into Podio. He takes care of all the new prospects and leads in Podio, classifies them, sends them out from there to sales guys, myself.
Yep. Okay, so lead manager does that. You have an acquisitions manager, and you have a VA that's helping with other administrative tasks,
I have
transaction
one
management.
VA who's basically transaction coordinator and one who's a cold caller.
Yeah, yeah. And then the question is, are those folks all tapped out based on your spend, or could you spend more and keep those roles busier?
For right now, let's just assume that they're tapped out.
Okay. So if you spend more, you'd have to hire more.
Yeah, likely. For in-house, for sure. Lead manager acquisitions, I would say yes to that. Cold caller, I mean, he's going pretty, makes a good amount of dials per day, a good amount of connections. So let's assume he's tapped out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say you just have to, because what starts to happen is if you grow from where you're at now to doubling, you're basically going to spend more money on advertising, have more administrative support and more acquisition support, right? So you just have to kind of layer those together to say, like if you were a restaurant and all of a sudden your business doubled, you need to buy more food, you need to have more servers, and you need to have more people washing dishes. Like those roles, you're not bringing on new roles, you're just doubling or increasing the amount of activity of those roles that already exist probably. So
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, I mean, does it make sense? It's not complicated. It's just like I need 2 of those instead of 1, and eventually I need 3 of those instead of 2, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
At some point when you get above that, then you start thinking about, do I bring on a COO or like overall business operations manager to take crap off of your plate so you can, enjoy your life more, which is why we all got into this in the first place. But
yeah, absolutely. It's just, you're talking about the stair step, and that's exactly how I feel when I get to that next step. I'm like, I feel a little bit more comfortable. I can breathe a little bit, but then getting to that next phase is like, all right, we got to run really hard. And should I have my hand in every pot? That's where I start to struggle a little bit.
Here's what I'll say to that is a lot of us are control freaks, right? Like we have a hard time giving it up. I am too. I don't have to work as hard as I used to, but I still do because I'm a workaholic and I'm a control freak. I have some issues with that. I got issues, Josh, let me tell you. But let me tell you, if you're in your own way, then you're just a bottleneck on the business. I mean, my businesses usually do better when I'm on vacation or when I'm not around because I'm not there causing problems, right? And so we all aspire to be the absent owner that the business is just running, like from the Robert Kiyosaki or the investor. Like, you don't need any of my time. I don't manage anybody. I just use my money and my resources to make me money. We all aspire to get there. It's really hard, honestly, in an active business like this, but it doesn't mean you have to be like a solid I. You could be like business owner and I. Like there's hybrids between the quadrants, right?
Yeah.
But I think until we can get out of the way on our stuff, then we're just in the way, right? So the more you can step out, if you look at any of the guys that are doing 150 deals a year plus, like a lot of them have COOs and they've stepped out. Like they're still there. They know what's going on. They get pulled in probably more regularly than they say on social media, but they're not running the day. They don't have like a day-to-day role where the business stops if they're there because you just can't. You can't scale that with you in the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest mindset shift that it's taken you to get to where you want to be, or someone else to be in that top expert level? What do you think that biggest mind shift is, like, to that spot?
Yeah, I'm not where I want to be for sure. I would say it's getting out of the way, kind of reiterating what I just said. Because I tend to like if I owned a McDonald's franchise, like nobody would get those fries as golden brown as me, right? But I can't run the business if I'm the fry guy either, right? So the problem is I get pulled back in and I'm like, I want to approve stuff, or let me look at, for us, real estate's very transactional, right? So you tend to like, I want to approve every deal or whatever. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but those are the things that require your input unless you find a way to get out of the way. And so I would say, like, what I have to do personally is I have to stop believing that everything requires my input. Like I I think I'm the best at a lot of what I do, or that I can't find somebody to do what I do better, which is total BS. Like anything that I do right now, I learned. Like, it's not like I came out of the womb like flipping houses and I know how to do stuff. Like, I had to learn these things. And so the fact that I'm spread thin because I do a lot of things, I'm 100% certain I could find people to do it better than me. But that's a mindset shift. We're because a lot of us started doing everything ourselves, and therefore we believe that, like, well, I have to bless everything, or I can only I can click that mouse right there. It's like stupid, right? But we just can't get out of our way. And some of it is because we don't have redundancy in our business. Like, we don't have backups to the backup. So therefore we keep getting pulled in all the time. And then we allow ourselves to get pulled in, even when it's not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Two more questions and then we're at the end here. What is something, like, I really like giving everyone in the group something tactical for what they can implement into their business. What is something tactical that you may have learned in the past year, a couple quarters, or even something that you found success in lead generation, in outbound marketing? Just something tactical that maybe you can put your eyes on and put in your own business.
Yeah. I just kind of reference like what we do at Investor Machine as a service. Like, data is everything, like the quality of your data. And we tend, as real estate investors, we just want to check the box and say, did we get the list? As if this list is a stagnant thing that's out there. Like, we buy these lists. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get messages sometimes asking about if I want to sell a house that I haven't owned in like 2 years. I'm like, who's wasting time with this data who's selling this data, by the way, that is so outdated, or who bought the list 2 years ago and they assume that list is still good, right? And we refresh our data like almost daily. So we, it's a pain in the ass as a real estate investor. I get it, but you have to use better data. That list is a living, breathing thing that's constantly being, reduced. Stuff's getting removed and stuff's getting added. But I realize that that's a lot of work. So I think, historically we all look to buy a list. And what we've realized is, like, we have to create the lists. Like, when I buy data, like, it's always a mess. It's inconsistent. And I just know, like, how some of these guys that sell data, like, how they throw it together. I mean, they just like, good enough. Just throw it out there. They'll never know, or whatever. Then nobody's trying to be I'm not trying to say anybody's doing anything wrong, but I just know they're just trying to get it out the door, and it's missing it has a lot of gaps. So anyway, my point is like, focus on the data, focus on people that are the most distressed. Like, because our margins are so high as real estate investors, typically we're willing to be wasteful. And I think the competitive nature of the industry over the past couple of years and where we're going from here is, it's going to get tighter, right? You've got to find ways to get more efficient with those precious dollars. And so said another way, if your budget's like 10 grand a month on advertising and you're like, well, 5K a deal in advertising and I make 25, oh, it's a good deal. It's like, okay, well, what if you could get that cost down to like 3 grand a deal, and that same 10K gets you an extra deal? Like, who wouldn't want to make an extra $250,000 a year just by getting more efficient, right? But we don't think about it that way. Usually we're just like, it's good enough for now because I've got a whole bunch of other crap I have to do. So anyway.
In the past 5 minutes, you've just like uncovered so many things that I've thought in my head that were like only me. And it's really funny to hear you say some of those, because you've talked to so many different investors.
Yep. Yeah. Data is key. Quality of your data is, it varies greatly from investor to investor for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Last question, Mike, what is your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal? Why do you work as hard as you do? Why do you do all the things that you do? Why do you do it all?
Yeah. I think part of it is just being honest a little bit. Is I don't ever want to look back and feel like I could have helped more people and I didn't. I really, honestly, I'm trying to create a life where I look back and I have some legacy that I can be proud of, right? And so it's always a balance. Like, how do we do that? How do we raise a family, do all those things, and help other people as well? Everybody on this call does that. Everybody that's listening right now, I know you do, Josh. You've got another baby on the way. You're going to have your hands full. Like, you don't have to do stuff like this, but it helps you feel like you're staying relevant. And, a lot of the things that I do at this point are to try to help other people be successful. And I just get a lot more joy out of that. Like, financially, I don't need to work as hard as I do anymore. Like, we live well below our means and we've done quite well over the past 12 years, but I get a lot of joy out of hearing people or getting like notes or other things like, hey, you really helped me here, or this changed my life, or whatever those things might be. And when you're out helping people all the time, you get those things, right? And it just jazzes you up like nothing else. So, I'm looking, I guess, to make an impact on the industry and help as many people as I can. And truthfully, as real estate investors and entrepreneurs, we're weird. Like I have friends that I went to college with or high school, but we just don't gel that well because they don't understand my life, right? And so when I hang out with guys like you, we're weird, but you're just as weird as I am. So we're all weird together. And we have this common bond in that we've been willing to take risks and do things that the average person is not willing to do to build a legacy and build a life that we can look back on and be proud.
Yeah, 100%. That's amazing. Just said that yesterday to Ashley. Like, how amazing is it that I can pick up the phone and have friends around the country that know exactly what we're going through and just be like, hey, have you thought of this? Have you done this? Have you tried this? Have a 10-minute conversation, talk about family too, but we totally resonate on the same level. I think that's amazing. So thanks for putting that together in the group. If anyone wants to find out more about you, Fuel, Investor Machine, where should they go?
Yeah, if you want to, I'm all over Facebook and social media, so you can find me there, Mike Hambright. There is another Mike Hambright, is a dude that just got out of prison and has a big swastika tattoo on his chest. That's not the Mike Hambright. This is a different guy. That was crazy how I found that out. I was like, oh my God. I don't think he's related in any way. I hope not. But anyway, you can find me on social media. You could go to investorfuel.com to learn more about our mastermind for accomplished real estate investors. Actually, our next event is coming up in a little bit less than 4 weeks. So if you're interested, you should jump on that pretty soon because it's coming up fast. And then our agency model where we help real estate investors with high quality lead generation is called The Investor Machine. And that is actually theinvestormachine.com.
That's incredible. Well, Mike, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. Thanks so much for
buddy.
your expertise and most importantly for being a go-giver. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, guys, have a great day. Thanks for being here and talk to you next week. Bye-bye, guys.
See ya.